Okay, welcome to our Revelation study. This is study 25, and we are in chapter number 8, getting into some really interesting stuff that will make you think about present day in a lot of ways. We're going to see some of that early chapter number 9. We're down in verse number 10 and 11 of chapter number 8, so we're just going to pick it up where welcome to all of our folks out in internet land. So let's go down to verse number 10. We're going into the third angel sounding his trumpet. So let's look at verse 10. And the third angel sounded, in other words, blasted his trumpet. And there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. Better translation on that lamp would be torch in the Greek. A torch. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the third part of the waters. Now let's stop right there because I'm going to get this next verse, but let's get into this somewhat. The star here that he's talking about is, many believe, is probably a meteorite, and I think that's probably true. That's what most people believe it is, which would contain, as most meteorites do, bitter gases. So it's on fire, which of course we know that's kind of what a lot of the things we find about meteorites are, of course, when they're hitting this atmosphere. And so it represents in the Word of God, judgment. Okay, so when you look at that, that's generally what it's talking about when you see fire, is judgment. It can be in one sense righteousness, but in this sense it is not. This is the third judgment in a row, which contains the judgment of fire. And God is a God of fire. He's a God of judgment. 3 speaks of divine fulfillment. So 1/3 of the rivers are contaminated by this meteor. Now, when you think about all the rivers there are, 1/3 of all the rivers of the world are contaminated. Now, you say, how can that be? Well, he gives some insight. He says the fountain of waters. What does this refer to? It means the springs of the earth, which is man's real water source, okay? So we know that in the flood, Noah and the ark, that not only rain came down, but God pushed up the water from the earth. That's where a huge part of that flooding come from. So it's talking about those internal springs. Our farm, we had a submersible well for most of my life growing up. Well, we didn't remove it until after I was grown. They brought through city water. Of course, you drink that water now. What we had, we should have kept what we had. But anyway, that's internal springs that are running. So these fountains of the earth, that's what it's talking about. So we look at that. 1/3 of the water source in the world is contaminated. Now, give you a little interesting fact. The riots that were going on in Iran pre-war with the United States here recently, over the last 2 or 3 months, the reason they were rioting was, part of it was because they ran out of food and they've run out of water. They have several dams around Iran to the northern part. They trap the waters and stuff like that. The problem of it is they're in a huge drought. I have seen aerial pictures of those dams, and there's almost no water behind them. They're not holding anything back anymore. Tehran, which is their capital, has been funneling water in by water containers, tankers. People come out with their little container. They've not been taking baths in a long time. Shall we say Iran kind of stinks now? Probably does. I'm sure the hierarchy does, but the common people don't. They go out with their little containers and they come by there like maybe a couple times a week. You got to know what's in. And then these huge, you can imagine a capital city, how long the lines would be with a few tankers around. They go up and they get their water, and that's supposed to last them until it comes again. So they were in a mess to start with. And that also impacts their food source. Then when they can't get things in and out, that's impacting our food source. So they're kind of experiencing a little bit about what we're talking about here, going to be in the tribulation period, where all of a sudden there's going to be a lack of water, a lack of drinkable water. Then notice the next verse in verse number 11. And the name of the star was called wormwood. Basic definition when we get into wormwood, that's a European plant that when we look at it, it's got like a silver, kind of a silky leaves to it, okay? Silky feeling, and it drops kind of a yellow flower heads, and it yields a very bitter dark green oil. So the oil that would come out, if you were to snap that, there would be a dark green come out, but it's very, very bitter. And it represents something bitter or grievous, or probably one of the best definitions you can come up with is bitterness, period. It means, wormwood means undrinkable. So this star is named wormwood. And God is going to use this star with these poison gases to make the waters, 1/3 of the waters, undrinkable. Our population is exploding, not going out. We have over 8 billion people, the first time in the history of humanity. So it's not going down, it's going up. So we're looking at this. He says the star is called wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood. It became bitterness, or, better translation, undrinkable. And men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So when they drink this poisons the waters. It's not only bitter to drink, but it's actually kind of poisonous. So it contaminates the waters, and a lot of people die. Look at verse 12 and 13. And the fourth angel, notice how fast we're going through all this. The first trumpet blast was found in verse number 6. Now we're down to verse 12. In 6 verses we're in the fourth trumpet. We're just blazing through this. And the fourth angel sounded, the fourth trumpet, and the third part of the sun was smitten. Our sun is approximately 93 million miles from this earth. It is our nearest star. It is not a planet, it is a star. It is a huge ball of gases and fire. And it gives us our sunlight, and it gives us our heat. And so when we think there's things about gravitational pulls, all that, it affects so much. But when you're looking at all this, it says the third part of the sun was smitten, and a third part of the moon. Well, it would only make sense if a third part of the sun was affected, would not a third part of the moon, which gets all of its light from the sun. So a third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars. I put a post out there some months ago where it looked like I was shooting out and you could see the stars out in the galaxy. There's actually a hole in the ozone here in the United States where they have a big observatory there. You can actually see, when you look through that portal right there, you're not looking at the stars of the Milky Way, you're looking at the galaxies. Now, people thought that was stars of the Milky Way because you couldn't hardly in that picture it was like little pin drops everywhere. That was different galaxies, and we're in the galaxy Milky Way. So that's how much of a creation that God made. It's unbelievable. But when you look at this thing, and it says, a third, or here in verse number 12 says the third part of the sun, the third part of the moon, the third part of the stars. So is he talking about a third part of the Milky Way or a third part of all stars? I don't know. Certainly the Milky Way for sure. But it could be a third part of all of them. We don't know. And it says, notice this, so as the third part of them was darkened, they lost the capability to produce light. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Now, get this picture. When this happens, when this star wormwood, or when this fourth one is sounded, a third part, however he's going to do it, is going to be smitten. So it's going to be destroyed. Now, we know that there's, sunflowers and all that, and they say every time there's a sunflower, a big sunflower on the sun, big flame will come out, and it's going to impact our weather here. 93 million miles away. Can you imagine if you take that great big ball of sun and you carve out 1/3 of it? It's going to become, it's going to impact light and dark, and that's what he's alluding to here. He says, he goes on down in verse number 12, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and not likewise. So what you got going on here, when this happens, is smitten. They no longer give their light. They no longer reflect that light because it's not there to reflect. And so the judgment brings the world into a new kind of terror. Now, I remember when Mount St. Helens blew out in Washington out there. And it was like 2 or 3 days before they could see the sun because of all the ash up there. They were driving through in the middle of the day with their car lights on, just like it was absolutely dark. And so when you think about this, you think about the terror within the skies, in the heavens. So with the third part of the sun, moon, and stars losing their light, day and night are going to be impacted. And notice how the structure of this says. It says, and the day shone not for a third part. So does that mean the first third of the day? let's say if we've got 12 hours of daylight. So we're going to say the first 4 hours, it's still dark. Kind of reminds you if you go to the extreme north where sometimes it may go, 6 months, you don't have any daylight. 6 months, you got all daylight, they go. But this is saying the first part of it. So you're going to lose all your, the way I read this, does this mean we're going to lose, the third part? Is that the beginning part? If it's the beginning part, can you imagine how it's going to impact crops? Crops get their strongest daylight from early in the morning to about noonday. I can promise you that. Think about how that's going to impede growth as far as crops. Think about, gravitational pulls. And there's so many things that all this is going to impact, And so we're talking about something here that all this, we're going to lose our day and our night's going to be impacted. So now man faces 1/3 of Earth's natural light is going to be gone. Wow. Another 4 hours. Okay. And then the nighttime is going to be impacted. So, you look at that. So that means the nighttime is going to gain 4 hours of darkness. So, one of the things that I so despise, come in. I despise about the winter is you lose all that daylight. Yeah. I like to be outside. Well, you know how it goes. By 5:30, you might as well come in the house. And I'm used to summertime when I love summertime because you can sit on the porch still be in daylight about 9 o'clock. But you think about a third part of that day then, going to become, nighttime's going to be extended, daytime's going to be shortened. Yeah. Okay, we know night and day impacts, the moon impacts our tides. Low tide and high tide. Okay, so how's that going to impact that? Think about shipping. You think about this is going to impact, notice, our world. So judgment now is coming upon the world. We're in Revelation chapter number 8, and in verse 12 and 13. Notice as it goes on there, verse 12, right? And we're getting ready to go to verse 13. But notice this third part. Wormwood's going to impact anything. And so we're seeing that when we see all these things and how this all comes out. Well, notice that I'm going to turn to it here. Kind of how this starts going along with Luke chapter 21. These are Jesus' words. And in verse 25 and 26, and there shall be signs in the sun. Now, he's talking about these last days, Jesus says. This is kind of conducive to Matthew 24 and 25. Okay, which Matthew 24 is the tribulation chapter, so this is conducive to that. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations. What that means in the Greek translation is anxiety, anguish of heart. You talk about people popping pills now for anxiety. They're going to be popping pills a lot because there's going to be extreme distress in our country. The earth distress of nations and perplexity. So it means at a loss for a way. It means at a loss for how to proceed. So when it says that there's going to be a perplexity, it's saying people are not going to know which way to turn. They're not going to know which direction do we go to our government. He's got the answer. What do we do? Farmers are going to say, how do I grow crops with 4 less hours of sunshine? Well, the guys out on the ship saying, what am I going to do now? The tides are different. The day and night's different. This is going to impact almost every function of our world. And so that's what he's talking about. Now notice verse 26, men's hearts failing them for fear. So in what we're talking about here in Luke 21 and 26, men's hearts are going to fail them. They're going to die from being overwrought, filled with anxiety. What's going to happen? You're going to start talking about a lot of heart attacks. And for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. So in this trumpet we're seeing here, great calamity is going to go on. And look down now in verse 13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven. So this is the blast of the trumpet here going on. And it says, notice here it says, and this is the fifth trumpet here. He says, I beheld an angel flying through the midst of the heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe. Well, in theology, I learned this very profound thing. When it says, behold, you need to stop and see what you need to look at. When it says, therefore, you need to stop and see what you're looking there for. But when it says, woe, you need to stop and pay attention. He says, woe, 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 3 times, divine fulfillment. That's what the number is. So here's this angel going out. It says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels which are yet sound. So now the 5th trumpet sounds, and it says, well, you just went through some great calamities in these first 3 that we had before the 4th one here, or before the 5th one here. And says, tell you what, these next 3 are going to be a lot worse. We're still not yet to the halfway point of the tribulation period. That's why it's called the great, because it's going to be greater than what we could ever imagine. So this angel goes out and he's calling out here and he's saying, woe, woe, woe. So the verse here, the angel here literally means eagle. Eagles are often used as types of judgment themselves in the scriptures. And the best manuscripts that we have read eagle instead of angel. I've told you before, you have to watch your interpretations. I know people that will swear to you the 1611 King James Bible is without question the absolute Word of God. It is the Word of God. But folks, it wasn't written in English. We got to understand that. Let me show you how fluky English is. English uses all kinds of letters that are silent. Have you ever thought about a night? Does this say knight? No, it's got a silent K. So it's N-I-G-H-T. Okay, what are some others? I'm trying to think. There's all kinds of them. I can't think right now. My mind's right. But they have a lot of silent letters. But see, the problem of it is the 1611 Bible was actually finished in 1610 by 3 universities there in England. And they had the best minds at the time trying to interpret this stuff and from the original languages. And they would pass different ones to each other, and everybody would go through different translations until they finally come out with the same thing. They all agreed just as good. But we had like 14 other books that later on we took out, okay? Because like the Book of Enoch and things like that, and all kinds of Book of Maccabees. You know, I read some of those books, and they did not fit, I feel like, within the framework of the King James Bible. But here's the thing, these were multiple languages come together. The English language was not finished until 40 years after this Bible was published. Do you know how many more words we come up with in 40 years? There's new, I go by the Oxford Dictionary a lot, which I think is one of the better ones. But there's new words added to the English every year. If you buy a Oxford Dictionary today or a Webster's Dictionary today, next year it'll be out of date because there'll be more English words put into it. They create new words, or there's more words to come up with. But the problem was you had a restricted language trying to use words that made fit other words, but we didn't have a word for it. So they would use another word. Okay? And so when you look at that, you're saying, okay, so they used the word they had. But it'd be like going to China and say, okay, I'm going to learn Mandarin, and you learn 5,000 words, but there's 20,000. You've got to use your 5,000 to explain to them, and you're trying to explain to them, and they're saying, that don't make sense. You're using this word for this, and that's not that word. Well, that's the only one I got. That's the King James 11 Bible. So that's why true pastors that are wordsmiths have been reinterpreting words for people forever. Charles Haddon Spurgeon used to do that. D.L. Moody used to do that. I mean, all the greats, that's what they did. Why? Because our language wasn't even done yet, but we published a book that said, okay, all this fits. Well, it doesn't always fit. So this word actually in some of the better transcripts here was eagle, okay? The word implies a messenger who is sent by God. We get that. This messenger is going to announce a very serious warning. How serious is it? God repeats it 3 times. Woe, woe, and woe. Woe means alas. It is a severe exclamation of tremendous grief. He says, woe, Whoa, whoa. So 3 times. So he's raised the bar here about how grievous it's going to be to a triune grief, and he's saying, you're not going to be able to believe what's coming. So in these 3, there are 3 here that is coming. We're going to witness the great impact of these 3 woes as we read on in the scripture. The eagle messenger here flies far above, as he takes in this scene. So this angel is like flying above all that he's seeing in the tribulation period. That's what the picture is. He's like up there soaring around, and the eagle flies higher than any other bird. And the eagle will fly toward the sun, and then when it hunts, it comes out of the sun. So the prey's down there, if they look up, they're looking straight at the sun. It's a very smart creature. But it has tremendous eyesight. You're way up here, and what your natural eye can't see, it can. It can see a rabbit down there, and it might be thousands of feet up. God is showing us a precise view of what is coming, and it encompasses 3 tremendous woes. So this messenger is flying way above everything, taking it all in, and so the triple woe is coming, 3 great judgments, and notice what it says here. It's going to be 6. These are going to be these next 3. So when we look at this, we've witnessed these first trumpet judgments, primarily dealing with land, sea, rivers, and fountains of the waters. And now notice this 4th trumpet, it relates to the heavens. So we went from the earthly judgments now to the heavenly judgments, okay? He warns that the remaining 3 angels are about to come and are far more severe than what's already come. So that's what this one is announcing to us. There's more judgment coming. First 4 trumpets are not only judgments in themselves, but they're warnings of 3 more severe judgments to follow. And that's what really the 5th one here is talking about. And it's going to be more severe in nature. So that's what we're seeing here. So think about what this physical world has meant to humanity. I mean, I love this physical world. I love to see its beauty. I love the Blue Ridge Mountains. I love our streams. I love to take a bike up here, on the Creeper Trail and ride. I'll stop along the way and sit there and just watch the river and take it in. I love I was out on my back porch, I guess it was Monday afternoon, and taking it all in. They were cutting some trees over there across the road, which I'm so thankful for, because there's about 100 trees over there, and I'm so thankful they cut 10 foot of the limbs off and left 100 trees there, because the last one that fell went right across my power lines, and I lost power there, and it broke 3 light poles. We were without power, and the guy that owns it over, he ain't cut another tree since. And they're all rotten and dying, and so they're going to keep coming down on them lines, but they're not going to cut them down. That's another story. That's not found in Revelation, by the way. That's Bill 1:1. So you can look it up later if you want to. It's out on the internet. Check me out. But anyway, you think about what he's trying to say to us. There is so much more to come. And one deals with the physical world. Now, you think about how man has ruled this earth for thousands of years. And all of a sudden, what all this has meant to us, and then God's going to take the rule away from us. We're going to face calamities we can't do a thing about. Nothing about. The Bible tells us, and just think about that. Psalms 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament the firmament showeth his handiwork. My goodness, how can you not see God's handiwork? Romans 1:20, for the invisible things of him are the creation of the world, from the creation of the world clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Jeremiah 31:35, thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea and the waves there. It's talking about the waves and all that, high tides, low tide. The Lord of hosts is his name. Make no mistake, folks, these judgments will send a clear message to lost humanity who's in charge. Now, I see some of these guys, the politicians, everybody else get up there, and they'll mock the name of God and make a mockery of it and blaspheme. And I thought, big boy, you wait. You'll meet that God soon, and you'll keep your mouth shut. I promise you. All right. So we see the end of this chapter now is sounding the alarm. All right, let's look at chapter number 9, verse 1. And the 5th angel. So we're going to see this preliminary is that 5th trumpet coming. That's what he's doing in the latter part of that verse 13. He's saying this is the prelim to the fifth angel sounding. He's saying there's a great woe coming. So he's setting up that fifth angel. And the fifth angel sounded, I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, we need to throw a big old air brake on this one. Yeah. This fifth trumpet sounds, and he's told us in Judgment 4, there's 3 more coming. And this is really giving credence to the fifth one. And so he spent 6 verses on 4 trumpet plagues and judgments. Now he's going to devote the entire chapter to the next 2. 6 verses he dealt with 4. He's going to deal with the whole chapter now with just 2 of these judgments. So when we think about this, he's the fifth trumpet here will bring a 5-month period of torment on unbelievers that has never been experienced in the history of humanity. Never been experienced. And I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth and given this key. All right, now think about this. Let's kind of begin to put this together. Could this be, well, let's back up here a minute. This fifth trumpet will bring that 5-month period of judgment. But could this be the beginning of the tribulation period, or the second half tribulation? Well, if so, our timeline would be 3.5 years into it, or 42 months. Well, now, I've already told you that's not correct. We don't get to that point until we get to the end of this series of judgments. So that would be the end of the trumpet judgment, starting into the 7 seals. So we know that can't quite be right. Okay, I've stated that the halfway period is at the end of the second series. This is the second series, but we're not in. This is halfway through it, the fifth one, 5 out of 7. Okay, so when we think about that, by the end of the 6th seal, that'll be 42 months in, and we can plainly say chapter 11, chapter 12, we're at the midpoint. Okay, so this is not it. Verse 1, this star, notice the star, or most likely an angel, is unnamed. Okay, I got to switch left. That one just went dead. So this is basically an unnamed angel. Remember that, angel. Okay, and it says here in this. He says, in this verse, he says, and I saw a star, an angel, fall from heaven. Y'all remember any angels that fell from heaven? I remember one. Satan, Lucifer. You know? So when we look at that, it's saying this star, unnamed, fell from heaven. I want you to notice this, past tense. Tense in the Bible is important. So I say, I sure wish I'd done a lot better job in English, because now I study it all the time. But it's past tense. It speaks of an event that's happened in the past. This would mean or imply in the past before the keys of, when we talk about this, the keys here of this abyss or bottomless pit was given. He fell, and then the keys were given later on. Okay? Keep with me here. Fall here is in the perfect tense. You say, Pastor Bill, what does that mean? It signifies something that's a completed action. Okay? So the fall is a completed action in the tense of the structure. Trust me, God knows his grammar. Okay? We might mess up a few things, but he didn't. So, could this be speaking of Satan? I think it does. Luke chapter 10, verse 18, this is a verse you need to underline if you don't have it. And he said, Jesus here speaking, he said unto them, I beheld. Jesus giving you firsthand experience. I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Fall, past tense. This was when he was walking the earth. So Jesus was sharing with those around him in Luke chapter 10 here, I was there when it happened, and I saw it happen. Now, he fell from heaven. Where'd he go? Well, I believe he went to earth. Now, I've always taught, as far as I know, all of my ministry, from all the way back time I was a teenager, that Satan was cast down to the earth. Because of verse 1, but then also in Isaiah, and I'll get to that in a moment, that's what I base it on. Okay? So the star fell from heaven unto the earth. Okay? So let's look at this when he says this, unto the earth. Where'd he go? He went to the earth. Okay? What does that signify about creation? Satan fell during the creation. Okay? Now, I've said for a long time that I believe Satan might have sinned very possibly on the first day of creation. Okay? Now, sunlight was made on day 4. But think about when the earth was made. Go and look that up. The earth was made. Okay? So, when he began to make the heavens, it may not have been refined to the point that we know it now, but it was made. So, when I look and when Jesus was saying these things here, I beheld Satan as a lightning fall from heaven. So, when I think about what he's saying in this sense here, unto the earth is what he's saying right here. Okay? So, when we look at that, unto the earth, that's giving us a declarative. He is declaring this was where he was here and he fell down here. He doesn't necessarily, when you look at this, he says, I saw a star fall from heaven. That's where he was. Didn't tell you what he was doing. He just told you the location. All right, under the earth. Then it told you where he would be. This is his new location. This is his new dwelling place. So he was thrown out of heaven. I only know of one angel that in a single act that God threw out. Now he threw 1/3 with him. But I only know of one angel that he calls particular here where he was thrown out, and that was Satan. Just says 1/3 of the angels with him. So when we're seeing all this, he was cast down to earth, and so unto the earth. What does it imply? It implies that the earth had been formed before Satan's fall, this star's fall, or this angel, and it had to be during creation work. And that's my opinion, because I believe the scripture backs it up. Okay, now let's see about this. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 through 15 is where I kind of get this from. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Here, Isaiah, who really gives a real depiction of Old and New Testament, both 66 chapters. The first half is reflective of the old 39 chapters. The second half is reflective of the New Testament, 27 chapters. I mean, he is an outline of the Old and New Testament, great book. So, how art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Man, you are one of the anointed of God. I believe that he was the great musician. He was the choir leader. I believe that he was the highest of the 3 archangels. I believe he was the one that guarded the throne of God. How art thou cut down to the ground? Didn't just say earth. Okay, he's out there and he's got him a jet and he's flying around. Nope. He went right to the dirt, which did weaken the nations, for thou hast said in thine heart. Now notice here what Isaiah says here. Thou said in thine heart, of course this is God speaking to him. Now notice these I wills. If you want to go back home later on, you ought to underline these I wills. I will ascend unto heaven. I'm going to exalt myself in the heavens. I will exalt my throne above the other angels of God, above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. Now he's challenging God area. In the midst of the north is always speaking of heaven. When you go by the locations, north points heaven. That's what it does. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Well, that's God. Yet shalt thou be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. So he was cast down to this earth when God was just forming everything. Later we see that God placed him in hell. So when you compare these scriptures, I think, this unnamed star here, I believe it is. We could say it could be, but I believe it is talking about Satan when he was banished from heaven to earth. Now, down to the earth. Now let's look at what he also said. And to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. A key is always reflective of somebody that has authority over something. You lock a door. Who you give the key to? The person needs to get in and out that has authority to go in and out. I've been waiting on Fort Knox for Trump to call me up and say, Brother Bill, yeah, what do you say there, Trump? Well, I've got a key, for Fort Knox, and I want you to have it. I'll say, well, if you really want me to, you mind sending me a couple of tractor trailers? I'm going to need them. What for? I'm going to use this key, President Trump, and if you don't care, I'm going to get me a little vacation money. Now, if we were given something that kind of authority, wouldn't it ruin all of us? Well, Satan was given a key, but look what he was authority of. Yeah. All those fallen angels, all that wickedness. He says, I'm going to make you the authority over all the darkness and wickedness that exists upon this earth. That's what it's really referring to. A key in the translation of the Hebrew means shaft. So around that, you need to write out there from that shaft. Now, key, like I said, represents authority. So he was given authority over the bottomless pit. And with that authority over the bottomless pit, guess what a key does? When I built a fence around my backyard, I built for two reasons. One, I had little Maltese, and they like to roam, and I couldn't run them down all the time. I got tired of running them down. And I also had a brand new grandson, who's now my son, and he was a toddler, so I built a fence around my yard. And the little rascal, I would put something in, and he learned how to get it out. So I went and got me two locks, and I locked them. He'd go out there, and he'd holler, Papa, Papa. I said, no, you don't need to go to the front yard. You got this big old backyard, twice big front yard. This is more territory. But you know how it is, what dog did? He went run all four corners fence like, let me out. And I thought, you got all this backyard. How much more you need? But don't we always want more? He wanted more territory too. But I had the authority of, I let what I wanted in that gate, but I also let what I wanted out. He is giving Satan authority of what comes in there and what goes out there, okay? That's not to say that God can't cast people out, because he can. But what I'm saying is, he has made him commander-in-chief of the entities and the demons and the darkness of hell. That's what it represents. So those that reside there. Bottomless means abyss. It says, has given him the key to the bottomless pit. Now remember I told you that if you were to go to hell in your sin, you would have fear on you, I promise you. Why? Because you'll always be falling. No wonder the demons didn't want Jesus to cast them, out of the man there, the demons out of the man. Didn't want them to cast them back where they come from, which would have been back in the abyss of hell. He said, send us into the swine. They'd rather take up their abode in those swine as they would be cast back down that bottomless pit. Think about falling all the time. Think about trying to put your feet down, there's nothing there. Think about wanting to rest, lay back, you can't. You're always falling. It's a bottomless pit. There's no bottom, there's no end. Pit here means the shaft leading down to the abyss. So the bottomless pit, that is that shaft. I told you that key. What is that? That is the key. That is that opens the shaft. Okay? So we're looking at all this. He was given the key or shaft to the abyss. It speaks of being the entrance from the surface of the earth to the heart of the earth. You say, you mean to tell me there's a shaft somewhere spiritually? Yep, that's what this implies. There's a way that the day is going to come when this is unopened. Those demonic beings that have been down there for thousands of years, and I don't believe more than 6,000 years, because that's when the earth was created, but they've been down there at least 6,000 years. But these have not been allowed upon the earth, I think, at least since Genesis 6. And that's where the angels or the angels, our demonic angels, tried to corrupt the lineage of Jesus by possessing the men of the earth. And so if you had everybody possessed, how are you going to carry that lineage on? So that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to corrupt the seed by corrupting humanity. And so these have been cast into hell, not allowed out. Now you talk about the demons we got doing the work on this earth, they're rookies compared to that bunch. This is the worst of the worst of the worst of darkness. And there's going to be coming a time when that bottomless pit is going to be open, that shaft of the abyss is going to, that entrance is going to open, and that pit there, it's mentioned 3 times. in this chapter. Verse 1, verse number 2, and verse number 11. We'll see it again. 4 additional times in Revelation, 11:7, 17:8, 20, verse 1, 23, verse number 3. So this bottomless pit is a very big topic here in Revelation. Luke chapter number 8, verse 31 says, this is said to be the abode of the demons. Now think about this. And notice what he says here. And they besought him that he would not command them to go out into the deep, the bottomless region, the pit, the one that has no foundation to it, a place where there's absolutely darkness and yet total heat, a place of no rest, no sleep, a place where there is no love. So in essence here, that's what he's saying. Now let's look at verse 2 and 3, and that's where we're going to draw our line for the night. And he opened the bottomless pit. Wow. Here we are in Revelation chapter 9 in the middle, just past the middle of the second series of judgments. And this trumpet blast, this fifth one here, opens up the pit. Let's see what happens. And there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. Now, I watched some films the other day where they were blowing up Russia and stuff like that, and Ukraine was bombing some of their things. Yes. Them other missiles. And I'm telling you what's true. They had panned that camera, and you couldn't hardly see the background of the horizon. And it was broad daylight. I mean, the smoke was so intense. Remember, like I said, Mount St. Helens? It blocked out sun. Well, you think about what he's saying here. And he says, there arose a smoke out of the pit, smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the moon were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. It is so thick. What's coming out there is so thick. Now, it's not smoke. It says it's like smoke. There arose a smoke out of the pit, but it's not really smoke. That's the best way you could describe it. If you saw something like that and you were John, you'd think, how am I going to write that? Well, you would go back and fall back on what you know. You say, well, it looks like smoke coming out there. You can't see anything past it. Okay, but what was it? He says, well, it was so much of it, it was so thick that the sun and the air were dark. Well, that's like smoke. And by reason of the smoke of the pit. So that's what he's doing. He's saying, the only way I know how to describe it is the smoke. Verse 3. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. And to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. So out of this bottomless pit, this abyss, this immeasurable depth. Now think about that. It has no bottom. It has no end. It just keeps going forever. Just like hell goes forever. And the pit here talks about that shaft leading down into that bottomless pit. So he's given the keys, the key or the shaft to the abyss. So this is speaking about that entrance. Now, when we're seeing all these things, notice here he says the smoke comes out, air is darkened, the skies are blackened by the darkness of what has been released. What is that darkness? Demons. There are so many of them that it just blankets out the sun. You couldn't see the sun. And the locusts here are like scorpions. Well, now this description, when we think about this, not of the natural scorpions. They are representative of the hordes of demons that abide in hell. Is he talking about little scorpions crawling around? No. He says that's what they look like. Well, everything I've ever studied from occult and stuff like that, when they talk about, demonic beings and stuff, and then people that I've dealt with down through the years, same thing, said, you just can't believe what they look like. They said, this thing's horrible. It doesn't look like anything we'd think that was earthly or human or anything like that. A lot of them, well, if you go to the occult, they have the head of Satan as a goat head. I remember years ago down in Miami, the sheriff down there for that county was saying, we don't know what's going on. Well, I didn't know what's going on because I studied the occult too long. They said, we got all these people coming in and hating everything, and their national religion is the occult. That is their national religion. And so that's what they do. They're into the occult, lock, stock. You don't go down and talk to Jesus if you want to keep your life. But anyway, he said, we're out in the county and people calling in. They said they find a goat out here without his head. Well, I knew what that was. they take those skulls and everything, and they preserve the outside of it. They make a mask out of it for their high priest to wear. That represents Satan, that goat head. So when I used to do it, I thought, I know exactly what that's talking about. So when we're looking at all these things, they say it kind of looks like a head of a goat. He has the body of a man, hindquarters of an animal, no feet, hooves. So he's part beast, he's part man, but he's also part God, is what they're trying to mimic. So we think about when we're looking at all these things, you know, this is talking about representing the hordes of hell, demons that have been restrained from tormenting humanity for thousands of years. Like I said, it goes all the way back, I think, to Genesis 6 when those were bound. And notice they're going to be loose to do something. What is that? Torment men. Torment them. More than any kind of torment we've ever witnessed on this. I tell you what the Nazis did to people was absolutely had to be demonic. There's no way. Throwing babies out of top stories and the guys down there with bayonets, it was a game. If you could catch a baby, a live baby, on your bayonet, you would win the game. It was a game. And how they would come up to small children and just whack them. Wouldn't use a bullet, they'd just whack them. You know, cut their head off, whatever. They didn't even think they were human. So when we think about that, it's going to be nothing. So I believe this goes back to the most wicked of demons when God confined them to hell because they were trying to corrupt the family line. I believe that's what God sanctioned them to hell. Jude 6 says this, and the angel which kept not their estate, but left their own habitation. They didn't keep their boundaries. He hath reserved, Jude now, New Testament, he hath reserved in the everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Jude wrote that. So there have been angels in their fallen state who refused to stay by the boundaries of God. And God said, okay, you won't remain in the boundaries? I got a boundary for you. I'll reserve you into everlasting damnation until the end. I believe these are the ones going to be released. Notice these demons were given power as a scorpion. This speaks of their ability to inflict hurt or harm upon humanity. I mean, just hurt them in every way. This would imply every form of torment known to man. Emotional, spiritual, physical, everything. Walter Scott said this, I want to see if you agree with it because I don't, that the locust army is symbolic representation of judgment of a superhuman kind. Neither the smoke nor the locust are literal. Oh yes, they are. Because God said they were. I don't need your false interpretation. I don't believe that. I think it's wrong. So here's another false belief that I think, why locusts though? Because I think the locusts serve an opinion that they say a locust bite is one of the most tormenting kind that you can have. And in the Old Testament, locusts were many times used by God for matters of divine judgment. These locusts are going to be used in a similar manner for divine judgment. They have that tail, they can strike you, and you'll die from that poison. But look at how, the picture of a locust, they're like a small monster. And I think it's where these demons will be. Let's stop right there. Get my safety old pen here. I think this one's going to be 26, lesson next week, 26. We're going to stop right there. And so we're getting into some of that really tough stuff right now about Revelation, but when we really begin to see where we're at, think of this. With all the demonic infusion into our earth right now, I don't think we've ever seen a time where demonic activity is going on like it's going on right now. Even in Jesus' day, almost everywhere he went, he encountered demonic controlled people. And these were little villages. Nazareth was about 150 people. We think Nazareth, a great big city. He grew up there about 150 people. That's why his dad was going somewhere else to be a stonemason. He was a carpenter, but a carpenter was mostly a stonemason. Why? Because, if they had 2 or 3 carpenters there for 100 people, you had too many. So you had to go somewhere else to get work. And so when we look at that, all these little villages, and yet all these little villages had demon-possessed people. So what about today? I think we have demon-possessed people. I think people are doing crimes out there they're so unnatural and unholy. I think they're demonic. I do. But think about how much worse it's going to get. It's going to get a whole lot worse. More drastic than we could ever imagine. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you got this. If you didn't, we'll let Terry take care of it. God bless you.